Welcome to the Rich, Young, and Powerful podcast. This is the place where we help average givers become everyday philanthropists. I'm your host, Andrew McNair, a financial commentator, author, nine-figure wealth manager, and philanthropist too. I'm going to show you how to give more, how to find more fulfillment, and help you impact the causes that you care about the most. Because when a giver gives more, they receive and become more. And I'm really excited about bringing on our special guest. I know that many times you have sung in the car listening to his music. He's a 5-time Grammy nominee, 2022 Songwriter Artist of the Year, 2023 Golden Note Award recipient. He's also been an American Music Award, Billboard Music Award, K-Love Fan Award, GMA Dove Award, and has been named Billboard's Hot Christian Songwriter of the Year. Matthew has 35 #1 songs combined as an artist and a songwriter. So without further ado, Matthew West, welcome to the Rich, Young, and Powerful podcast.
It's great to be with you today. I'm excited for this conversation. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I'm glad to have you. I always like to hear about every guest's journey because you are at the pinnacle of what you do. And so I always love to hear about people's habits and really what habits did you have to nurture to become the songwriter and the artist that you've become?
Well, I definitely feel like the theory of 10,000 hours has been one that I've applied and put into practice. I don't know that you're always mindful of it while you're doing it, but years and years of building up the discipline of writing songs. For me, I have a lot of different titles these days. Musician, recording artist. In terms of my career, I write books, I have a podcast, different things. But at my core, I've always felt like a songwriter at heart. Like that's my first love musically or career wise, if for lack of a better way of saying it. And I found myself once I discovered the ability to tell my story through a 3-minute song, that just lit me up. And I wanted to do it over and over again. And my wife will even tell you that she could tell if I haven't written a song in a couple weeks, like if my schedule demands have pulled me away from that creative zone, because she'll tell me I'm in a bad mood. She's like, you need to go write a song. Like that's kind of how it is for me. It's a little bit like oxygen, musical oxygen. So I definitely have put in the years of work in learning how to write songs. And it's like any type of skill set. It's like exercising in the gym, like developing those muscles, those instincts. And a lot of my story, though, I love to share the reality that much of my story as a songwriter was forged out of the power of the word rejection. And what I mean by that is I moved to Nashville with aspirations to sign a record deal, Andrew, where I was going to be the guy in the front, on stage and become some big star. But for 4 years in Nashville, I received no yeses. I received all no's, all rejection. Every record label turned me down. And during that 4 years, you know what happened? I started developing as a songwriter. I kept my head down and I kept writing and writing and writing. And so actually, my first opportunities came as a songwriter as a result of the rejection I was facing, wishing that other door was going to open for me to be the singer. Instead, I started having opportunities to write songs behind the scenes for other recording artists. And so all these years later, I can smile now to see, man, rejection is never rejection when you know who the author of your story is. Rejection is always keep your eyes on him and keep faithfully working, putting in the time, and daring to believe that God's plan for us is bigger than our own. So I'm thankful for the rejection that I faced in my life because it really taught me the discipline of songwriting.
Well, I mean, that's just such a powerful testimony. Most people don't think they'll find success through rejection. I mean, that's oftentimes, sometimes what you have to go through. But I want to talk about how early did you figure out that you had that songwriting desire and eventually ability? Like you grew up as a pastor's kid, right? Did you start writing as early as a child?
No, man, Andrew, I was a knucklehead, man. I thought I was going to be a professional baseball player. I was way off. I thought I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, and man, everybody, it's crazy because when I look back now, I see that God had put people in my path all the time that were telling me it was almost like all these people Like, you ever see the movie Bruce Almighty, where that old guy shows up all the time throughout the movie, and he's holding a sign and nobody's paying attention to the warning that he's giving? I feel like for me, I had people in my life, when I look on the road of my life, there were people that were holding a sign saying, music, music, you have a gift. God has a plan for you. But I had blinders on, and all I saw was, I'm going to be the starting first baseman for the Chicago Cubs. Well, I'm talking to you today from Nashville, Tennessee, in my recording studio, which is the proof of, the fact that our ideas and our dreams, as well-intended as they might be, they don't come close to what God's plan for us is. And I always remember my dad would coach me in this, and he would use terminology that he knew would resonate with me. And he'd say, son, your dreams are good, but at best, they're minor league dreams compared to God's major league plan for you. And so I guess you could say I made it to the major leagues, just in a totally different profession. And instead of a wooden baseball bat, I'm holding a guitar. And so, long story short, I didn't start writing songs until I was 18 years old. And I was graduating from high school. My dad bought me my first guitar. And I swear, I literally put down a baseball bat, put down my glove, and picked up a guitar, and the rest was history. The minute I started learning to play the guitar, I was just like, oh, this is awesome, man. Girls dig this. No, I'm just kidding. But I was like, I knew it. This was what I was put on earth to do. So sometimes our dreams have to be rerouted too, because our ambition can often be our own worst enemy.
Well, I think it's just so encouraging because some people, they think they're too young or they're too old. And, I think at 18, just to start picking up a guitar, that's the beginning of your 10,000 hours. I think that's encouraging to some that are in college that haven't yet figured it out yet. And I also always want to go ahead.
Well, I tell it's funny now because I have a daughter in college and she's 18, and I could see it in her eyes sometimes, like, she feels like, why don't I have it figured out yet? Why don't I know what I'm supposed to do in my life? And man, I love to encourage people at whatever stage they're at that, like, man, greatness is just ahead of you because you have a great creator who has a great plan for your life. And, maybe you've struggled. Everybody finds their passion and calling at different times and different seasons. And that's why I love throughout Scripture, there's so many examples of God using people of all different ages, whether it's the little boy who had the loaves and fish, right? Or whether it's Moses, you know what I mean? So the spectrum is wide, right? And it also gives guys like us hope too to go, hey, you know what? Like you introduced me saying I've reached the pinnacle of the music industry. Whether or not that's true, sometimes you can start to even worry where I'm at, going, well, what's ahead of me? Is my first act my only act? Right? And so I love the encouragement when I read God's word that's like, man, there's going to be a second act and there's going to be another chapter of this story. And so I can keep pursuing, believing that greatness is still ahead of me, no matter what failures or successes I've had. But I love to encourage my daughters with that message as well, that don't get discouraged if you don't know your purpose yet or your path, right? And the good news is we can all know our purpose right away. In terms of what we're really on this earth to do is to glorify God, right? And so that, knowing that is chapter one, and then the rest, can start to take shape as you pursue the one who made you and discover his plan for your life.
I know with your podcast, there is this theme about my story. Can you elaborate on that and tell us a little bit more about your podcast?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've discovered it in my songwriting too. I write songs that are steeped in real life, man. Like I like to say that my songs have been lived in and lived through. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not just pulling stuff out of thin air. These songs that I write, they're inspired by my story. They're inspired by the stories of other people's lives who come to my shows or send me a letter and they share about what they're going through. And I think what I've learned, and when I receive stories from people, man, one of the common refrains that I get from people is they feel like their story is insignificant or their story doesn't matter. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, I've collected thousands of people's stories. In fact, have a whole nonprofit organization that's inspired by encouraging people to recognize that their story matters, their story is significant, and their story can have a great purpose and impact in the world. And the reason why I started that whole nonprofit is because I saw a need. I saw that there were people left and right who deep down, they may cover it up well. They may even look successful. They may be massively successful in their life, but deep down, they've been made to feel like their story is insignificant, or maybe they've messed up a bunch of times and their story is disqualified. How could God possibly use a story like mine? And so I think that's a big theme in my music, in my podcast, in my books, is hopefully speaking to anybody out there to acknowledge and help them and be encouraged to go, man, if you're here on this earth, if your heart is beating and your lungs are breathing, there is a purpose for you today. Your story matters because the master storyteller has decided that it is so. And he has you here on this earth for a purpose. And then that's our goal. We get to tap into that. I think too often, though, we get it twisted and we think, well, then my story is for my glory. Like I want to achieve something that makes the world see me, applaud me, think that I'm special. What separates me from the crowd? I want to be famous, or I want to be rich, or I want to have this car. I want to, you know what I mean? These statuses of and symbols of success. And I think that's where we get off track, right? Is the realization that our stories are here, but it's not for our glory. We're here for a greater purpose. And so I sign off every show, every episode saying, hey, remember, it's your story for his glory. And to me, that's been just a massive turning point in my life as someone having a career that's on stage, under the lights, on the radio. Somebody's asking for my autograph or something like that, man, I can quickly get lulled into how good that feels and think that it's my story for my glory. But the most fulfilling moments of my career and my life have come when I've been beautifully and humbly reminded that I'm not here for me to get the glory. I'm here to live out a story where people look at me and go, man, the only way that was possible is because of the one who made him. You know, we want to live our lives in a way where God gets all the glory.
And you're spot on. I mean, that's exactly what this podcast is all about. I mean, when the rich young ruler, goes to Jesus for validation of, how do I get eternal life? I've got it figured out. I'm rich, I'm young, I'm powerful, and I just need eternal life. That's the only thing I'm missing. And it's about his glory instead of God's glory. And God invites them to be a part of the story, invites them to follow him and be a disciple, and how his story would have changed and been a part of the greater story of the gospel, but instead chooses unwisely. So no, it's absolutely, what a great segue. And I do want to talk about those who, because I think they can appreciate this from someone that is a songwriter, from an artist, is when you're going through a rough time or a low spot in your own life, how do you get on stage and lead people to worship when sometimes you feel like, how can I worship because I don't feel right? And I need refreshing of my own. How do you go about doing that?
Man, I'm smiling because that's such a great question, because guess what? That happens so often. And a lot of times it's feeling like a hypocrite too, like getting up and like right now, my big song is Don't Stop Praying, right? And it's like sometimes I'm so busy during my day that I forget to take care of first things first. And then I get up on stage and I'm singing Don't Stop Praying. And sometimes I'll feel like guilty going, man, like, am I living these songs that I'm singing? You know what I mean? And I think the grace that I find on a daily basis is what keeps me going. And the reality is, Andrew, like, I start to realize these songs that I sing, they're not me saying, let me show you how to do it because I've mastered the art. They're songs that they're talking about living your life in such a way, not that I have achieved it, but in a way that I aspire to achieve it, right? Like Paul talked about, not that I have obtained all these, but I press on, right? Paul was, admitting, I haven't reached that level of perfection, but I'm going to run my race and keep trying. And that's how I feel when I'm singing these songs. But the short answer to your question is, how do I feel? How do I get up on stage like when I'm discouraged or I'm tired or don't feel like I've lived the messages of my songs? It brings me to this place of dependence where otherwise I would walk on stage with this feeling of self-sufficiency, like, oh, I've got this. I put in my 10,000 hours. I know how to write a song. I know how to do a show. I know how to sing well. I got this. But the weaker I feel as I'm heading on stage, the more dependent I become. And the more dependent I become, the more there's no question who gets the glory at the end of that concert. And so I smile sometimes when I'm on stage just going, all right, this song might be for the audience, but I know it's for me. And I'm thankful for those moments where I know that I'm completely dependent on God. And I ask God to forgive me for the rest of the moments of my day, because the reality is we're dependent on him every second of every day. The reality of it for our lives is that we tend to forget that quite often.
Exactly. No, you're spot on. And I think that's an encouragement. I think that's what someone needs to hear today that's listening to the podcast. What I was thinking about while you were talking about is just, the lamp to my feet. And I heard a teacher put it this way, like, it's a lamp to my feet because it's not a spotlight into the future. Like if I start running too forward, I get away from the Lord being a lamp to my feet, and I'll stumble, I'll fall. And at the closer I can get with him, where I have this yoke that I passed off to the Lord, and we're going there together on this journey of life, I'm less likely to fall. And when I'm dependent, that's my strength. I mean, if weakness is this dependence is the goal, weakness is the advantage, as J.P. Pokluda would put it. So I think that is really powerful that people need to hear. We talk a lot about being a generous giver on this show a lot. When did your focus shift? And maybe it was always this way, but when did your focus shift, not just meeting your own needs and meeting your own family's needs, to meeting the needs of others? Was it always that way? Or was there a point in your life you could feel that shift where you wanted to be more poured out, even more than you already are in your writing?
That's a great question. I think certain values for those of us who are fortunate enough to, and I realize that I'm not in the majority necessarily, but to be blessed with the type of upbringing that I had with a mom and a dad who just incredible people, and they instilled just by the opportunity for me to watch how they lived their lives, not just hear what they said, but watch what they did. They they always did and continue to live lives of I don't know how else to describe it other than like dangerous generosity. You know what I mean? Like,
What a good way.
my dad's the kind of guy where I literally have seen him, not figuratively, but literally give the shirt off of his back to a drug addict who's in need, right? Like, I've watched my parents give, not just to their family, but to their community, to their neighbors, my dad used to always preach a sermon about our time, our talents, and our treasures. And he would talk about, how God's called us to be generous in giving of all of those three. And I mean, you and I both know this, and anybody listening knows this, that like, it's one thing to hear somebody tell you what you should do, but when they back it up with their actions, then that's when it really speaks louder than any words ever could. So my mom and my dad, from a young age, I watched. Now, this is the thing. I didn't just watch them live dangerously generous lives. I also saw the fruit of that. I saw God's provision. I saw God honoring their generosity. Like, we never had much money at all, but we wanted for nothing. Like, God always provided for my family and for my parents. And so I think when you witness that at a young age, it gets like I want to be that. And then I want to be known as a generous person. And so I think throughout my life, I think I've tried to emulate what my parents put on display for me, and I've tried to show my daughters and lead my family in the area of generosity as well. So I can really point to my parents and thank them for instilling that value. I want to be known as somebody who was generous and compassionate and giving, and more than he was selfish. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I hear that so often, that modeled behavior, and the statistics from Barna study actually show that. And I find that so fascinating. So many things we want to instill into our children, to our grandchildren, to our nieces and nephews, and they don't hear everything. Like, maybe you want to get across your work ethic, your beliefs, your belief systems. You want to get, even weirdly enough, you want them to have your same political beliefs, especially as we come up to this election. And that's what causes division at the Thanksgiving table. And you think, like, what they actually will take away is the dangerous giving that your parents do, that you model. They're actually more likely to actually follow that, because they can see eventually the Lord working through provision and actually supplying those needs. And I just think it's fascinating that that's what sticks to most generations, is not you're teaching them these investing and saving habits so much as, you hope that sticks. But what I've seen stick is generosity. And I don't have a reason why. I think we could do a deep study into that, but I think it's amazing. So, and I would love to jump in and for you to share some of the nonprofit that you've built, but also the ones you're affiliated with. I would love to see how you're modeling that for your family as well. Love for you to share.
Yeah, I also have to say, I mean, I love what you just shared, and I think that's so cool. Like, just to think you know, to think of younger generations like being impacted by the generosity of their parents or their grandparents, and I'm certainly living proof of that. I'm thankful for the example my parents have set for me. I hope to set that example with my daughters. I think early on, even though like my music is known in Christian music, and it might seem like it's obviously it's a ministry in my opinion, but it's also like a for-profit entity. Like, I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I make a living and I get royalties, and I have a great life, and I feel very blessed, right? And it just to be able to make it this far, and there's running a business. I have, you know what I mean? Like, that's part of me growing up in my life has been like stepping into the CEO role, which maybe doesn't come naturally as a recording artist and songwriter, but realize you got to run a business too. But then also just like checking my motives at every turn too, because, even in Christian music, you can get like caught up in going, well, do I do this show? Does it pay me enough? Does da 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 da, right? And then it's like, what is the goal here? Like, is there ever going to be a number that's enough money that I've made that's going to make me feel right? And so I do think that like, that living a generous life is a work in progress, like constantly being reminded of what really matters. And so these days I get excited to make more money so that I can give more money. Like, you know what I mean? I get excited about what I'm going to be able to hand down to my daughters, right? So to me, generosity first starts in like, I know who I'm responsible for my family, my wife and my daughters. You know what I mean? And then I want to generously provide for them. I want to leave behind. I want to be wise with my money so that I'm not a burden on my daughters, but instead to be a blessing on them. And then beyond that, from a career standpoint, like as a singer, I could become disconnected to the people that we would call my fans, and maybe just like keep everybody at an arm's distance. But something beautiful takes place when you find out that one of your fans out there has had a car accident, and they're going through it, and they got all these medical bills, and it's like, well, what if instead of just singing to people, what if I'm able to like help raise awareness and raise money and make a gift and make a donation? And so my mind started turning years ago about that. And that's what led me ultimately to start a 501c3 feeder foundation where, and I called my dad, and my dad, like I told you, how my parents have impacted me in the area of generosity. So it's a real natural fit that they would partner with me in that. And so we do lots of different things. I mean, one of my favorite things we do is during the holidays, I've got a song about turkey called Gobble Gobble, which is not my best song I've ever written, but it makes the kids sing during the holidays. And like we do efforts to partner with other ministries to help feed the hungry, and we call it giving a gobble away. So we give a gobble away at the holidays, and then during Christmas time, we pinpoint different individuals and family who have hit specific extreme financial hardships. And man, we just hit them with a big old Christmas financial blessing, right? And so my goal, like I get so excited about that. Like I love making music, but man, when you can step into somebody's story and bless them, man, that like the gift you receive when you're giving is one that just fills you up. Like it's like literally the secret to life. Like it almost becomes selfish because you like that feeling so much. Because people don't realize what it is a gift to receive, what you receive when you give. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
those are some of the areas of my life right now where I'm passionate about giving and living out a generous life.
Well, I thank you for sharing. I mean, I think you're spot on. A lot of times, if we're not careful, what's enough money is equals more. I mean, that's what happens is we say more. That's how much I need is more and more and more, and it's never enough. But I love the idea of getting addicted to actually giving money instead of addicted to just earning and then keep on moving the goalpost of what success is. And I'd love for you to take some time and share about the Don't Stop Praying movement.
Yeah, man, it's been so awesome. Like, I think the job as a songwriter too is like you want to have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in society and what's going on in people's lives and communities, and then hopefully write songs in real time that will hopefully speak a real time message that's relevant for right now. And Don't Stop Praying, I mean, heading into an election year, it just felt like almost like a campaign slogan for the believer, right? With so many divisive messages in the world, I was like, this song about prayer just felt very timely. And so as we were headed closer to the election, we started thinking about like, what if Don't Stop Praying could be a message that people could take beyond a 3-minute song and apply it to an opportunity to be a light in your community in the midst of all these divisive messages. And so we started printing up these yard signs. I mean, talk about in an age of social media, we went old school. And we printed these yard signs, and thousands of people have ordered yard signs. And on any given town, any given city, any given street, you might drive down, you see all these campaign yard signs, and then right there is a yard sign that just says, "Don't stop praying." And so, you know, that's just been a really awesome, like when a song becomes like a movement, if you will.
Amazing.
Like it transcends just a catchy song. It becomes a movement, and that's very exciting.
I think it's amazing. I think it's what we need to hear. The beautiful thing about prayer is it can unify. It can give you a humble spirit of understanding what the leaders of our country are going through. And it recenters us on what really matters, which is our leaders knowing the gospel. And ultimately, peace can come out of prayer. And so I think that is the right movement that's what I vote for, is praying. More prayer.
Well, I need to get you a yard sign, Andrew. And people can, if they want to go to don'tstoppraying.com to find out how they can be part of that movement. That's a great place to start. But I need to get you a yard sign too, man.
No, please do. I'll put it right in front of the office. Would love to have that.
Let's go. Let's go.
This can piggyback on what we're already talking about, but do you have any other strong beliefs that really isn't shared by popular culture?
Well, I definitely think as a believer in God, like I feel like a lot of my beliefs, first of all, they should be strong beliefs. Like, you know, what do they say? If you've got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything, right? So, I want to live my life with conviction, you know. I believe in the sanctity of life. I believe that every story deserves a chance to be told. it breaks my heart how many babies' lives are ended before they get a chance to begin, and how passionate a certain sect of our country is about taking life. It's very bizarre and evil to me, and so I'm an advocate for life. Um, I think there's a long list of beliefs that I have as a follower of Christ, that when I read my Bible, I realize that the Bible never promised that you're going to always be moving in the same direction as the mob and as the crowd. And so uh, I'm uh, I'm okay with that. And I try to always remember that I have an audience of one, and I'm gonna stand strong in my beliefs. And I've got a song out right now called Unashamed. And even just literally a strong belief saying, I believe in the power of the gospel. I believe that God is real. I believe that he sent his only son, Jesus, to die on a cross for my sins. Those beliefs right there are not shared by a lot of people. And yet, when push comes to shove, like, am I going to be quiet about that, or am I going to be bold? And I ask God to give me the courage to be bold at every turn.
I love it. I love it. I love the emphasis of having a strong belief, and that the beliefs that we do have should be strong ones. I do want you to share about Pop We, and for the listeners to learn more about it.
Yeah, it's a weird name, Pop We. It's like, but things like Google have given us permission to come up with bizarre names, right? So, but the name comes from the long version of is population we. In other words, if you've ever driven into a town or a city, you'll see that population sign. It'll say the name of the city, and then it'll say pop, and then the number of the people.
Sure.
And years ago, I wrote a song called My Own Little World, and it kind of took a harsh look at my own life about, it said, the lyrics said, in my own little world, it hardly ever rains. And it talks about, I always try to stay safe, got money in my pocket and shoes on my feet, in my own little world, population me. And the song talks about just that realization that, God, show me, like, I know there's a bigger picture. What if I'm missing out? What if there's a greater purpose that I could be living right now outside of my own little world? So that's where the idea for the name Pop We came from. Of just go, man, we can't do this on our own. We need each other. And that's why we started Pop We. My dad and mom are a big part of it. We send out a weekly devotional to people. We've got a list of subscribers that we just join in the journey. Like, hey, we're going to lock arms with you. If you want to grow deeper in your faith, we want you to know that you're not alone. If you're struggling with addiction and need help getting into a recovery program, we have partnerships with recovery programs, and we'd love to help you. We've sponsored several individuals who couldn't afford to get into recovery, and we've helped them get the help that they need. So that's really the heartbeat of Pop We, letting people know that their story matters. Ultimately, it boils down to our ministry is to help people discover how to craft, share, and live a fulfilling story with their lives. And we do that with devotional materials. We do that with a prayer network. And it's been a really, really incredible journey to be on the nonprofit side of things.
Matthew, I'm glad you shared about Pop We. I love the song, and I love to hear more about the backdrop to that song and what you're doing with that movement, Don't Stop Praying, as well as Pop We. Where can we find you over the next few months?
Man, I'm going to be everywhere over the next few months. I've got a fall tour. The Don't Stop Praying tour is hitting 17 cities across the country. And then we're doing some special Christmas concerts. But I've gotten smart over the years, and instead of going to like North Dakota at Christmas time, I'm going to the state of Florida. So it's like the retirement tour in sunny Florida. But yeah, I'll be traveling throughout the fall, and I just released my latest album, Don't Stop Praying. So if people can come out and see us on tour, that'd be amazing. But if not, they can have a concert in their own home and look up the Don't Stop Praying album wherever they listen to music. So it's been exciting, man. It's been a fun journey, and we're gonna finish this year just running hard towards the finish line.
Oh, I love that. Well, I hope I can make one of those concert nights. I do want to share about your podcast as well. Where can they find it?
Yeah, it's available everywhere you listen to podcasts. It's also, the video version is available on my official YouTube, which is Matthew West Official. But anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can type in, it's a very hard to remember name, the Matthew West Podcast. So I always have my dad on as a special guest, and he gives a little devotional, and we have lots of different special guests on the show. So I started the podcast during the pandemic because I was bored, and now here I am all these years later, still chugging along. So I don't know how I have time for it anymore, but I still enjoy doing it.
I think it's fantastic. So many great things did come out of COVID. So many bad things, but definitely a lot of good things too. And one is the Matthew West Podcast. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, speaking of good things, I love what you're doing, and I love your desire to encourage people to live a generous life. And I was fired up when I heard about the theme of your show, and to be able to speak about that. Usually I'm talking about my songs and things like that, but it fired me up to kind of dive into, like, this is where the good stuff is, and you're helping people to tap into the good stuff in life while we still have a chance. There's a song that I wrote, and I'll leave you with this thought, but just there's a song I wrote called "The Beautiful Things We Miss," and it haunts me in a good way. And it says, I don't want to miss it. I don't want to look back one day and find everything that really mattered was right in front of me this whole time. Open up my eyes, Lord. Keep me in the moment just like this, before the beautiful things we love become the beautiful things we miss. And so I want to just encourage you to keep up the good work, because I think your mission is on point, encouraging people not to miss the true beauty of life in front of us before it's too late.
Wow. Couldn't say it any better. Well, that's all we have for this episode of the Rich, Young, Powerful Podcast. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for making me feel young. The fact that I'm a guest on the Rich, Young, Powerful, I was wondering if you were going to call me for the rich and sort of old and weak podcast, but this makes me feel like you put new life in me today.
Glad we could help. Well, one thing that would really help us both and other new potential listeners is for you to rate our show on iTunes and Spotify. Also, check out my book, The Giving Crisis. You can pick up the Audible version on Amazon. And also check out our Everyday Philanthropist YouTube channel, where we answer questions about giving, philanthropy, and generosity. Again, always remember that until next time, remember that when a giver gives more, they receive and become more. We'll see you next time.